Hello, and welcome to the first installment of Theological Foundations for a Christian Worldview. I'm very excited to be embarking upon this journey with you, and I am looking forward to the things that we're going to learn from each other about life, about humanity, and whatever, if anything, is out there. And that's where religion begins. So let's dive in. The first thing that we're going to talk about before we get to Christianity, in fact, there's a sense in which we're not going to get to Christianity for some time. But before we get that far, even at all, we need to talk about religion. Because, I don't know if you know this, but Christianity is a religion. And Christianity is not the only religion. In fact, religion is a extraordinarily universal experience of the human condition. So we talked a little bit about in the introductory video why study religion. Well, to kind of expand on that, first of all, it's a universal human phenomenon. Well, not every single human is religious. Where you find human communities, you find religion. Humans do religion, and we are finding that they've been doing it since the beginning of archaeological memory. We have sites where people were burying their dead. They're crafting artifacts, temples, buildings, making art that show that religion is a pretty basic human aspect. It's part of the human condition. And so it's something that we all need to realize and we all need to recognize if we're going to understand the world. And that's gets us to the second part, which is it is key to cultural and social analysis. Since it's a universal human phenomenon, it has produced so much culture. From politics to economics to art, so much art is based on religious reflection. So if you're going to, as we talked about in the first video, if you're going to be culturally literate, if you're going to understand the human experience, then you need to know about religion. Even if you're not religious yourself, you need to understand how to think religiously. And this is a skill that, while I do believe very strongly will just deeply it will just deepen you as a human, whether you're religious or not. Just like, if you're not religious, I don't see why learning about art, even if you're not an artist, would be a bad thing for you. But in any case, being able to think about and in the mode of religion is going to help you to understand the world around you. And so that can play a role in whether you want to be a doctor or a business person or a lawyer or a teacher. This is part of the human experience. And the question that comes to mind immediately is why? Why is it such a big part of the human experience? Well, because it does concern the ultimate end of the human condition and experience. That's what religion is about. And this is what we're calling the big questions. So, let's start from the beginning. What is a question? Well, first of all, question comes from the Latin term quaestio, which means a seeking. It's where we get the word quest from. And basically, it is a human experience. Okay? So, I don't know if you've been around children very often, but you'll notice immediately from the moment that they're babies, which is an odd way to put it, but they are curious about the world. I remember when I was younger, I'd pop up awake at 6 in the morning for what ungodly reason? Because the world is interesting. And of course, if you've been around toddlers, you've had this exchange, which is, of course, the big why. Why? 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 Why can't I go outside and play? Because it's raining. Why? Because water's falling out of the sky. Why? Because clouds are vapor. Why? I don't know. Why? Because I'm not that smart. And this goes on and on and on until finally you just gotta say there's no more there's no more questions. Okay, and that's important. This speaks something about human experience, the human condition, as we've been calling it. The first thing is that questions bespeak intentionality. You don't ask questions unless you have an aim, a goal. If you were to come into my office and see me rummaging around and pulling books off shelves and looking through drawers, and you were to ask, as would be very natural, what are you looking for? If I turned to you and I said, nothing, just looking, you would probably think there was something a little off. And that's because people don't search for nothing. They search for something. They want something. They desire something. So the other thing is that at the end of the day, there are these final questions. Okay? And that's what we're calling big questions. So questions bespeak an intentionality, but they also have an end. There is an end to the question. And these are the questions that are the bedrock. There's no going under them. They're the final questions. There's nothing more to ask. So if you're asking, is there a God? Well, once you've answered that question, there's no further question to answer. That's the explanation. Because God, according to, for example, the Judeo-Christian tradition, is the source and the provider of existence itself. You can't ask what is the source of the source. So these are the questions that have nothing behind them. There's nothing there's no further question to ask. Is there a God? What does it mean to be? What does it mean to be human? Does life have meaning? Is it valuable? Does anything we do matter? Are we just an accident of stardust? What happens after we die? That's the big one, right? A lot of people are worried about this question. Some people are terrified. And that's one of the just basic human questions. And then, what's wrong with the world? And what do we do about it? These are the big questions. So the reason why big questions are important is not only because they are the bottom questions, i.e. they're the questions about the basis of reality, the structure of reality, why anything is the way that it is. And I particularly like this question. So this is the Time magazine from April 8th, 1966. Is God dead? What makes a huge national magazine, global magazine maybe, ask this question? And of course it is looking back to the Nietzsche reading. So one of the reasons that I have you read that passage from Nietzsche is because what Nietzsche gets at is that the way that we answer these big questions, not just that we have them, but the way that we answer them have profound effects on how the world operates. So these big questions not only have individual import, they also have social import. And so this is another reason why religion and understanding religion is so important. So thinking about the passage that we read, the parable of the man from Nietzsche, it's important to know Nietzsche is not a Christian. He's not even religious. He's a strict atheist. He does not believe in God, and he doesn't think that humans should believe in a God. He's not quite a nihilist, which is believing that there's nothing importance, but he does reject any religious explanation of the world. Now, why this parable then? Why this parable where this madman comes into the marketplace with the lantern looking for God? And the crowd, they make fun of him. Where did you lose him? Is he asleep? But when the madman throws that lantern down and starts that great description, Gott ist tot und wir haben ihn getötet. God is dead and we have killed him. Nietzsche understands what this means. Nietzsche knows that you don't get away with that answer to the question without profound effects, not only on individuals, but on society as a whole. And this is why he goes into that whole rant about how the earth is now unchained from the sun, and we're falling down, up, sideways. There's no direction. There's no meaning. There's no intention behind the world. We're just floating in the middle of nothing. And he understands that this is going to matter. So these atheists that are standing around in the marketplace, they think they're so sophisticated because they don't believe in God. But the madman knows that this is going to have consequences. How we answer these questions have consequences. And that's why it's important not only to know about them, but to think about them. So you see pictured down in the bottom right corner, this depiction of slavery. You have colonialists taking slaves from Latin America. This has to do with how the question is answered. What does it mean to be human? Or manifest destiny, for example. So when you're talking about the answer to these questions, well, first of all, if you discount an entire people group from humanity, it's going to affect how you treat them. This is how America could profit from racial slavery for centuries. And then to develop a doctrine like manifest destiny that believed that white people were God's manifest destiny to control the world. This is how these questions are answered. And this has effects like that. And so the way you answer these questions matter for how you view the world and what you're caring about, what you're going to make of it, and what you're going to do with your life. And so the various ways that humans have answered these questions, religious or not, have led to some of the greatest events in all of history. And not greatest meaning always good. Now it's important to make a distinction between what a religion teaches, or what a philosophy teaches, and what religious or philosophical people do. So I'm not claiming, of course, that if someone's an atheist, they can't be moral or something like that. But I also want us to recognize that when we have fanatics of any kind, extremists of any kind, they do not necessarily represent the teachings of the community that they're a part of. A good example right now would be Islam. Radical extremist Islam, like ISIS, does not represent Islam. Islam is a very peaceful religion, and most of its adherents, a huge portion of the world, are peaceful. So we need to make that distinction. However, it can lead to very, very incredible moments in human history. So when the Nazis answered the question, what does it mean to be human? And not only said it means to be Aryan, but it specifically means not to be Jewish. This had an effect, a profound effect. Martin Luther King Jr. faced with the same question in a world that mistreated and racialized and marginalized and oppressed Black people, had a different answer from this question, and it flowed from his religious beliefs. So the way we answer these questions matters to who we are and how we live in society. And so these questions, these big questions, are ultimate and they're universal. By ultimate, I mean, as I've said, they're final. If you know Spanish or Italian, ultimo, which means the last, there's no questions after these questions. This is the bedrock. And they're universal. These questions, no one is exempt from them. Everyone has them. You can ignore them, but they don't go away because you ignore them. They persist. And for millennia, humans have bent their energy on trying to answer them and have come up with more responses than can be counted. But there are always patterns. These questions are universal because we all have them. I myself remember when I was 4 years old, and I just turned 5, and I was laying in bed and I was thinking about how it's my birthday. It's my birthday, and I turned 5, and how time was going so fast, and it was going to keep going and going and going, and then I was going to get older and older and older, and then finally I realized I'm going to die someday. I remember once I was walking I was in high school, I was walking to school, and this thought just occurred to me. Someday I'm going to die, and people are going to just move on. The world's not going to stop with me. It'll keep going. What does that mean? Where do I go? Nobody gets out of these questions. And so, to wrap all this together, we need to understand that big questions are not just about curiosity. They're about desire. So remember, back at the beginning of the lecture, we talked about how questions bespeak intentionality. When you ask a question, you want something. You intend to find something. Well, these questions, if they are basic to the human experience, then they are basic to what it means to be human and what humans want. We want to know what we're doing here. We want to know, is there a reason? Maybe there's not. That's possible. We want to know why things are so seemingly wrong. Justice is a common experience. That's how movements like the civil rights movement in the 60s can work. Because, for example, in the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when all of those peaceful activists, black men and women, were beaten mercilessly by police, the entire country said, no, this isn't okay. Something's wrong here. This is what big questions are all about, and this is what religion is after. Answering these questions. The difference between thinking about these questions religiously and just thinking about them as, an everyday, mundane human, is that religion believes that this indicates where we come from and what our purpose is. So these basic experiences of wonder, of anger at injustice, of satisfaction at justice being done. Is that just social conditioning? Did this just come from an evolutionary imperative? Is it just part of us trying to ensure the survival of the species? Is it an illusion, an accident? Or is there something more? This is where religion starts. It's not about the rote learning of doctrines and rituals. That's something religion does, but that's not where religion starts. Religion starts with wonder. Leibniz, the German philosopher of the Enlightenment, asked the question, why is there anything at all? And it's a fair question. Why is there anything? Why does existence exist? What the hell is going on here? Religion says something very important. Something is out there. Something gave rise to this. Something gave rise to this situation. Something gave rise to the human experience. Something gave humans that desire to know where they came from and what their purpose is and what they should do with their lives. Religion says that there's something out there. The word religion comes from the Latin word religio, which means to bind together. Religion is a community bound together around particular answers to these big questions. And that first big question is, why is there anything at all? What gave rise to existence? What is beyond? What is out there? That is what we call in philosophy of religion the transcendent. And that is where we will pick up next time.